Hello, and welcome back to How to Be Human, Part 4. The title for this one, To See Things as Components or Names. And this is a little practice in not coming to an assumption of something or a super simple summary of something just by its name and coming to a conclusion of what a thing is based on its name. It's something people do all the time. They think they are superior to something because of how they can quickly run it through their mind, and this is vague at this point, but we will get into this. It's based off of an essay in my book, How to Be Human, called Names and What We Are. So basically, one of the names that we are is human, but it's much more complex than that. Okay, so you don't, when you're basing things off of just the name in a super simple concept of it, you're not really thinking, and you're not really giving yourself enough information to be settled on any opinion. You're just kind of giving up on life, and just pretending like you stand for anything or believe in anything. All right, so as we've been going through these episodes previous to this, you see how we're breaking things down. That's exactly what everything should have done to it. Just having a basic idea of something is not enough. Okay, so as was said before, we are reminding ourselves of what we are so we can properly diagnose what ails us. Seeing our humanness as something that begins and ends with us is to be in a mindset that invites imprecise thinking. If we think of ourselves in the crude form as a thing and not our component parts, we will attempt to approach life in a similarly inaccurate way. A modern person must mentally dissect everything from negative aspects of their personality to interactions between others to a topic they are contemplating and aspects of a religion, for instance. Typically, to generalize is to not care enough. To think of oneself as incapable of venturing on a path of development of a certain skill. This idea that you are limited to what you are now is one example. Habit breaking necessitates cutting through such a facade. So what I'm talking about here is somebody thinks, they see the product and the amazing what some maybe famous person or some really impressive person, what are they doing? You look at that and you're like, I can't do that because I am me. I am not doing that, or I am not capable of that. But all it is, you could be many things. You are not stuck being the you are now. There are many, stones on this path you can step along. You just have to find which one to go to each step and just lead how to become what you want to be. That's said very simply, but you are not stuck being who you are right now. That's what I'll get to maybe in the next essay. You being led by parts of you, like I talked about in the last essay, that are of an not last essay, 2 essays ago, about you being made up of older parts of your evolution that worked pretty much fine for older animals, pre-human animals, and they only cared about surviving and breeding, and they don't have human goals. And other parts of us have human goals. And so you can't be led down the path of not caring because a fish doesn't care, maybe a dog doesn't care. But there are certain goals that a human cares about. But we still have the same sort of survival programs in us that these other animals have. And once again, the idea was, I am me, and I can't change, I can't become that. Well, you can if you really, really cared about it. Maybe you don't care enough about it, and maybe your path is a different one. But, it all comes down to life experience. Sometimes life experience, the experience comes from interacting with things, getting out there, and things change you, and that new you that is changed wants to do these things more than you did before, and maybe that's how that person who is doing better in life, who is doing amazing things, I'm not talking once again like a self-help guru, I'm talking about really things you're actually impressed by, not just money making and looking impressive like somebody who looks like they have something, like they have it all together. But the product of their life, product of skill development, is something that intrigues you, but you can't be dragged down by parts of you that don't care, that are okay laying on the couch for the rest of your life and doing nothing, because that's good enough for the base organism, right? You can, survive long enough to maybe reproduce. That's good enough for the base organism, so you can lay around and not fulfill any human goals. That's pretty sad. So that's kind of what I'm transitioning to through this essay. And the next essay will be on the subject of efficiency and not being dragged down by false efficiency, which I spoke of briefly. I get to it at the end of this essay. So that's one of the core aspects of this book and why I'm going on this digression. So in many cases, you can pinpoint the aspect of something you wish to and consider it for its own sake. So you can look at something and say you think all of it is trash, it looks like garbage, but if you really look, maybe one aspect or maybe a few aspects are worthwhile. They are worthwhile for their own sake and worth considering. This is why attempts to mar the idea of something based on one of its many parts is invalid. Someone may say that they don't like Korean food because they don't like kimchi. A major part of the popularized cuisine is barbecued meat. And so a sensible reply would be, oh, so you don't like meat? Of course, a person could have bad taste. Be ignorant of the multitude of meals they offer, and dismiss it all as junk. Still, such a person would have to not like meat for their statement of not liking Korean food to be true. For outside Korea, it is Korean barbecue that is the main focus at most Korean restaurants. Marring their statement further is that the fault of not liking the cuisine lies squarely with the individual. They're not seeking better examples such as homemade quality food when judging. We can equate this with someone claiming to not like American food because they have tried X fast food burger. We must not fall into this kind of thinking. Another example is when people say X grocery store is expensive. If every item is more expensive than other stores sell them for, then this is true, but every food store I can think of has at least one type of item that they charge less for than other stores do. It is absolutely worth it to go to store 1 to get a type of meat in a larger quantity for a lower price, and go to store 2 to get bundles of fresh vegetables and herbs for a fraction of the price of other places. Categorizing which stores are best for each product is essential. The act of judging an entire store by assuming all things are priced as high as the first display you see is the kind of assumptive thinking that leads a person to falsely prejudge the world until they are practically left with one tile space to stand on. And so, this is a sort of thing I go over once in a while in this book series. And to make the statement that this store is expensive is kind of like dismissing the whole place. Okay, say you have plenty of money and you don't give a rat's ass if you're spending more money. This is generally not the case with most people these days, with super high rent and mortgage and high cost of so many things like school, and you're probably in debt. You shouldn't be just blowing money, right? So unless the store that sells something for cheaper is many miles away, it's probably in your best interest to just stop by a few stores and get what they specialize in, as far as, they have lower prices to bring you in on certain things, even if most of the stuff is shockingly high priced. Right? And what we're considering here is the usefulness to you. So does it matter that, kombucha over here is so much money, you weren't planning on buying it anyways? The display of flower bouquets are higher than what you see at the other store. This and that is more. You're not planning on buying those maybe, so it doesn't matter at all. You are shopping for this one item and they do have it for cheaper. That's the only thing that matters when judging if this store is expensive or not. It doesn't matter if everything is expensive. And that comes down to, say, another essay I wrote in this book is about this person I knew who smoked weed for probably 2 decades now straight, and was pretty much cut off from the world. And the essay title is "A Stoner Once Said," and it's just way out in outer space kind of things, because the person was like a hermit. They talk about a hermit. Say somebody, like a Japanese guy, was left marooned on an island after World War II, and he's just emerging back to the world because somebody found him after all this time. So if you hide yourself away that long, you're kind of in the same way, and I described the way he thinks. Okay, so once I brought up to him, it's worth reading a whole book, even if you only get one good idea you can use out of it. Of course, it's great to have the whole book full of great ideas, which is what I try to do when I write my books. But even one useful idea is worth reading that whole book, because, what does it take from you. It just takes more time you've probably been wasting, not only him, but most of us. It can be really easy to waste time in life. So you just put time over to that, doing that activity, and you've gained a great idea. If you really care about your life, that's you upgrading your life. It's like in a video game, say the Tomb Raider series, the newer one, or a lot of these Horizon Zero Dawn or something like that. You can gain an equivalent of experience and then learn new skills. Well, going out there in life and interacting with the world is gaining new skills, and reading a book and learning a really good new way of thinking about things or new information that's really useful to you is upgrading your life in a similar way. A lot of these video games, I think it's funny how you, the real you, goes out in life, you gain experience, you can get stronger. They've kind of brought that into like a quantified state where you have experience points, and that's their way of kind of measuring when an adventurer goes out and does something, practices their various skills, and then they become better at them. It's kind of what we can do, right? So I bring very practical examples in this little episode here because shopping is something everybody does, and discussing things like what kind of food you like, a certain product at the store or something like that is something people do commonly. And so it's important to think about these properly because they trickle out into way more important subjects of your life. And people in their petty little life, oh, I don't like Korean food, and in this petty kind of high school mindset the people can remain in for all their life. It's like, I'm better than Korean food somehow. It's like Korean food sucks, and like because they like your preference, it's up to you. But chances are you haven't really experienced the real thing, and you're giving it a shitty chance of proving itself because you're taking subpar example of something and judging the whole thing because one, you don't care actually, and you don't really have much passion for something like that, and it's not really a fair way to judge anything. And so people judge things in politics, TV show, personality that's talking in public, like it could be Neil deGrasse Tyson or something. People can pinpoint one thing they did and use a conversational tactic that's just kind of dirty fighting, and it's not a true way of proving something wrong or right, like an ad hominem attack or something like that. Or just say somebody has pages and pages of worthwhile ideas, and one of the things somebody says on YouTube or something like that you don't agree with or is flat out wrong. It doesn't mean that all those other ideas are not useful. Maybe that person said, let's go even further. They said something straight out racist. They're a bigot, or they attack people. They beat their wife or do something heinous. Maybe it's not, maybe you don't want to be personally their fan anymore. Fine. That's cool, but the ideas still stand. All right. So it's like me living in Korea for 4 years. I know there's a whole library of cuisine, and even the most picky person could like it, but they don't know about it. But they're judging it without knowing it. It's the stupidest thing ever. And that can go, you hear maybe older people judging sushi the same way. A lot of uneducated, kind of uncultured type of people. It's really sad. A lot of people in America that, we've seen, a lot of us have seemed to have lost our culture coming over the Atlantic Ocean once upon a time, and coming across the great landmass. I guess people gave up on their culture. They didn't have the ingredients to use, and so they forgot how to cook. They forgot what flavors were. They forgot what these ingredients were, and things became very, very simple, and we became acclimated to fast food kind of culture, and like Betty Crocker kind of overcooked crap, how the normal average person might cook it. Kind of hypochondriac, thinking that diseases are in everything, so overcook it, nuke it, and we're going to eat shoe leather so we don't die. Overcooking the meat until it tastes like that. And so you have something like authentic Mexican food you have here in California, and a lot of people who are uncultured don't like that. They would rather have the mass-produced mono flavors of unspiced meat, no cilantro, no marinated anything like they have in al pastor, right? Marinated pork. And it's just like you're not even alive anymore, and you're like, that food sucks. This tastes like grass or something. We hear that if we meet certain people's families. They think they're better than the culture that brought that around, and all this stuff sucks. It tastes weird, right? It's you not having a background in this type of flavor. It's, what do I call it? It's like your taste vocabulary. You don't have any reference for cilantro, right? That type of person calls it a taste like grass, because that's all they have to go back on. I've heard this many times. And so it's the same thing as people who don't read or educate themselves very much, and they're not keeping up logically with a subject, and they don't care, and they have no reference for any of these things. It just sounds like mumbo jumbo to them, and not worth anything, and it's garbage to them. But it's not. And that's kind of what I'm emphasizing here, to not prejudge things, not because we're being sensitive, but because we're being accurate. Okay. Right? And so the grocery store is not expensive if the useful things that you want are cheaper. But people talk like that, right? And you end up spending more money. That's the penalty of imprecise thinking, is you're spending more money at one store because, why? Because it's a tiny more amount of money to go hop across the street. The way places are built nowadays, you have a whole complex of all different grocery stores nearby each other. It's not that big of a deal. You don't have that many things to do in a day. Most people don't. All right, I get it if you have a ton of kids, blah, 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 but shouldn't you be saving money? I don't get it. I go on and rant about this because it's important. It also comes down to, like, this store is garbage, even though you've never actually tested and looked inside. It takes a curiosity to find out the reality out there. And I talk about stores once again because that's what we end up doing. We're animals. And a stoner once said, he saw like, oh, we're not animals, think going on the spiritual hippie trip. It's like, what are we then? Plants? I mean, what are we? Look at our skin. We bleed. We need food. And so on. It's like, we're going to go to the grocery store. Get that at least in your life settled. How that works. That's one of the very basics. All right. So, on I go. Here we go. I believe we are led to think like this because the mind wishes to be efficient. What lies outside what we consider our main focus in life tends to be generalized for the sake of not overwhelming us. Think of how people of varying degrees generalize the people of entire continents. This leads us to realize that despite the human brain being amazing, it is still limited. We must push against this tendency, especially when it leads us to generalize things that lie at the core of what affects our life. I call things that are efficient but end up harming the quality of the goal that is being sought false efficiency. And that is one of the biggest, it's one of the biggest things in the book. It's one of the most important things. And I think it's one of the most unique things about this book series is false efficiency, and a lot of new ideas I bring in, intertwine with it, and I think that's just part of it having real usefulness. Okay, so, and that will be the topic of our next episode, Part 5, Efficiency. Thank you for listening.